Bienvenue and welcome to episode number 4 of the Best Available podcast. This is Ryan Wallace, joined once again by Matt DeLuca, and this is part 1 of our 2-part NFL preview. In part 1, which will be up today, which is Monday, you'll get to hear our thoughts on the AFC for the upcoming 2020 season. And then in part 2 on Wednesday, you'll get our thoughts on the NFC. So, Matt, I think we finally got this figured out. We're actually recording while the sun is out. It is 6:10, and we're not going to go very long. I think we both kind of figured out what we need to do to not talk for 2 hours. So I think we're ready to go. I think this is going to be a good episode.
Well, I think the biggest motivating factor here is that we haven't eaten dinner yet. So we got to stop at some point so we could eat dinner. We also have a fantasy draft tonight, too. For the best available player fantasy league. So there are two motivating factors to not, keep people's attention for 2 full hours. So I bet the Walduses and the DeLucas are both very happy we're not recording at 1 in the morning again, too. So
the Walduses are not home. They are.
Ooh,
they are. Yeah,
are you
they
home alone right now?
I am. Wink, wink.
Culkin.
So, yeah, but I'm excited. This should be a fun 2-part podcast. So you can kind of think of this as episode 4A, and then on Wednesday it'll be 4B. And if you guys don't want to listen to people talk about football, which we have a lot of that already, we have this. The Halper Bros are doing their really in-depth NFL preview. They just put up the AFC West and the AFC North for part 1, and they'll have 3 more parts coming out this week. And then, as I said, we'll have 2 parts. We also have division previews in writing form going on over on the website, bestavailableplayer.com. We've had 5 so far. 5. We've had 5 so far, and we have 3 to go. And then we'll have our staff preview and predictions article coming out on opening night for the NFL, which is September 10th when the Chiefs take on the Texans. We've had a lot of really good stuff over there. Really happy. Ross Anderson started off with some flames with his AFC East preview. And then we went to Zach Cosenza in the AFC North, Billy O'Neill in the South, Joe Colon in the West, and we just started the NFC today with Noah Prochel and his NFC East preview. All 5 of them are definitely worth your time, so go check them out. And tomorrow, or I guess when you're listening to this today, David Austin Guest will have the NFC North preview. Matt DeLuca will have the NFC South preview on Tuesday. And then I will have the final preview, which is the NFC West, on Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. A lot of great stuff over there. But we are getting into our NFL preview with the AFC. So we're going to go East, North, South, West. So we'll start in the East. And you can't really tell right now, but Matt is wearing a Patriots shirt. So you can tell that he'll have, there we go. Yep, he just got up a little bit. So there it is. So you can tell that he'll have some really great input on this division, hopefully. Hopefully he won't be too biased. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But the big storyline, of course, no Tom Brady for the first time in a very long time. So this division, according to some experts, is wide open for the first time, as I said, in a very long time. And I do want to start New England because I think, Buffalo obviously made some additions and they have the young quarterback. Miami, it's probably not their year, but they still have some things that they're building on. But I do want to start with New England. They do have Cam Newton. They still have Bill Belichick. Obviously, they still have a very, very good coaching staff, one of the best coaching staffs in the league. They have some intriguing pieces on both sides of the ball. Matt, I see a lot of people saying that it's over for the Patriots. This is going to be a tough year for them. They might get to 500, and that's probably their ceiling. I look at the roster. I look at how the team is constructed. I look at the division in general. I still think that this is a team that can win 10 games and win another division title.
10 games might be a little too optimistic. I think that's the absolute ceiling for this team. It's funny, growing up watching Tom Brady play every year, and not really have to worry about that. I'm actually more excited, and I said this in our group chat with friends of the program, Zach and Glenn. I'm actually more excited for this season than I've been in quite some time, just because it's something new. And I really am confident that Cam Newton will come and return to his form that he had prior to last season. I don't know about 10 games, though. The roster has a lot of holes in it. Wide receiver still hasn't been an issue that they've solved yet. It's been kind of this deteriorating thing over the past couple of years, and one of the reasons why Tom decided to go down to Tampa. It's not really solved this year. They're trying to go the budgetary route. They cut Mohamed Sanu, which I didn't really get because they traded a second round pick for him last year. So people were saying they might, look for someone on the waiver wire, or they might try and trade for somebody again. That's the biggest hole. In terms of tight ends, it doesn't get much better. So the weapons around Cam really aren't ideal. So I think it's going to be a lot more of a run-based offense this year with Sony Michel and the other guys there, Damian Harris. It's going to be different. I think the guys they lost on defense are big too, but they still return basically the entire secondary outside of Patrick Chung. I think that'll be big. They don't have a kicker on the roster right now, but Bill Belichick's got something cooking with that, obviously. So I think 9-7 is realistic. I think 8-8 is realistic. The division isn't necessarily wide open. I think it's a two-team race. I think it's between Buffalo and New England. I think Miami's probably a year or two out, which is fine. I think they're a good team. You don't know what the Jets are, and we're going to talk about all these teams too, Ryan. But I think New England, you got to trust Bill Belichick. So I'm excited. I think Cam isn't the issue. I think the weapons around him are going to prove to be questionable. So that's the one thing I'm waiting on as a Patriots fan, as if they're going to make a move to get a wideout before the season starts, or just some safety blanket for Cam Newton, because they got Damiere Byrd, who played with him in Carolina for a year or two, but it's not like a Julian Edelman. There's no number 2 receiver. N'Keal Harry was not what we thought he was going to be last year as a number 1 or first round pick, I should say. So it'll be interesting. It's a new year. It's a fresh start. I'm excited. Regardless if they are, sucking and in a rebuild, I'm still going to be excited just because it's something fresh. It's something new. I think as great as the Tom Brady era was, I think it was time for all sides to make a change, right? And that's okay. Sometimes you got to move on from a quarterback. Indy did the same thing with Peyton Manning, so I don't think we're going to get Andrew Luck fall into our lap, but I think it'll be exciting. 9-7, I think, is a realistic expectation.
So if I say any stats in this episode, just for reference, they're probably going to come from Warren Sharp. And this one I think is very interesting. Last year, they were 23rd in yards per offensive play, which is 5.2. But if you take away the first 6 weeks of the season, they averaged just 4.9 yards per play, which is 25th in the league. That was the fewest they had averaged in a season since 2006. So the offense it struggled a lot last year.
If you watch the games down the stretch too, and sorry to cut you off, but they started 8-0, right? And I was pounding my fist last year, like, oh, this is the team. Like, over the back half of the season, and I wrote this in the article I wrote about Jarrett Stidham, drives were stalling. Everyone was just, pissed off at each other. It just didn't look like a good offense. There was no, and it's very easy to take Julian Edelman out of the playbook too, or not out of the playbook, out of the play from the defensive side of the ball. So there's not really too much there. And I kind of felt bad for Brady in many aspects. And that stat's very much believable. I think 23 is even kind of shockingly too high just from watching every game last year. So you're 100% correct.
I think that this all ultimately revolves around if Cam is actually healthy or if the 3 surgeries he's had over the past couple of years are just too much to overcome. But I think if you see a healthy Cam, you remember the last year that he was fully healthy a couple seasons ago, I think it was 2018, he looked very good. It was one of the better seasons of his career. Now, granted, he probably had a little better group of offensive weapons than he'll have here in New England, but still, I think if New England can kind of scheme a run-first power offense around Cam, and then with the group of running backs that they have on their roster, the wins might not be, very entertaining. A couple of them might be ugly, but I still think, because you look at their schedule, right? You obviously have some tough games early in the season. I say
it's the hardest schedule in the league.
Well, now see, I've heard that, but I look at the schedule. They have Seattle week 2 on the road. They have to go to Kansas City week 4 on the road. They have San Francisco and Baltimore. And that's 4 games. I look at all the other ones. Granted, the division games are tough. Any given Sunday, I get that. But I look at this schedule right now. I see some places where they could, it's a possibility that they lose. But
I could
I
pick out
really don't
six
think
losses right now
I
on that
really don't think
schedule.
it's as hard as people make it out to be. I really think
Well,
it's manageable.
the one thing that really, really helps their cause is that Sunday Night Football in Seattle, on Sunday Night Football Week 2, I think it's their home opener, not going to be fans there, or very limited capacity. I don't know what they're doing in Seattle. Can't imagine fans will be up there. Kansas City is going to be in an almost empty Arrowhead. I still think they're going to lose that game regardless of if, there's no one there. I think there's a lot of potential pitfalls on this schedule just because you don't know what you're going to get out of this team. And if you take last year's offensive output and you put it against the teams they're going to play this year, it's going to be tough. They really didn't compete against Baltimore. They really looked bad against Houston last year. They looked pretty bad against Kansas City, even though they were kind of in that game until that play with N'Keal Harry towards the end. So I don't know. You always got to count that at Miami game late in the year as a loss because it happens every year. For whatever reason, Bill Belichick can't win in Miami in December. So I could pick out probably 6 losses right off the bat here. I kind of disagree with you on that the schedule isn't hard because I think it's really difficult, especially when you have to stay out in LA for almost like 2 full weeks. You play back-to-back out there. And I don't care how bad those teams are, but you're still out there and with all the rigid COVID protocols, I'm going to assume, especially for a team staying out there for a full week, and how that state's handling the virus itself, it's going to be very difficult to kind of any kind of routine out there. So even that's going to be a difficult trip.
I get the travel part with everything going on, but I mean, at that point, the Chargers might be starting a rookie quarterback. The Rams, we'll talk about this more on Wednesday. I really don't think they're very good. I think they're a very average, maybe even mediocre team. It's just, I look at the schedule. I mean, I think they can compete with most of these teams. Now, as I said, granted, this is assuming that Cam is healthy and everything goes according to plan, but I think they can stay tough in Seattle. I think they can give San Francisco a run for their money. I do think they can't see in Baltimore. They're not at that echelon. I think they're going to struggle there. But everything else, I don't know. So, I really like. I think the outlook for this team is a little more positive the more I keep talking about them.
I appreciate everyone's positivity for the Patriots. I'm trying to take a realistic route just so that way I'm not disappointed by the end of the year. We'll talk about my opinion on the Niners Wednesday. I don't think they're as good as a lot of people say they are, just because of a lot of close games they played last year. So their record could have been a lot different. But they're still a good team. I'm not going to deny that. But I agree with you that could be a winnable game, especially coming off a bye. With me, I look at the offense, Ryan, and it really doesn't look a lot different than last year. And that's why I'm not so optimistic. And this isn't a diss at Cam Newton, going from Brady to Newton. They obviously bring different things to the table. But I don't know what Cam's going to do to make this same group that Tom couldn't make work, be productive. And I could be wrong. I'm not disrespect Cam Newton, because I've always been a Cam Newton guy, outside of maybe a couple times during that Super Bowl run that he had in 2015. It's just for me, I just don't know what else they did to the offense. I like the tight ends they drafted, but they're both rookies. I like Sony Michel, but they don't have Marcus Cannon this year. The offensive line still has a lot of unproven guys. So if the offensive line, and to your point, Ryan, with a run-heavy offense, if the offensive line stays healthy, which has never happened in the past 5 years, they stay healthy and they're at least productive to some extent, I can agree with you, because I think Sony Michel is a very good running back, still in like his 3rd year in the league. And then you have a couple other complimentary guys like James White and Burkhead. I can agree with you if that's the case, but they need to go out there and prove it to me this year, because outside of Edelman and Newton and Michel, it's a lot of nobodies.
Another team that's going to have to prove themselves to the league this year is the Buffalo Bills. They're a team last year that won 10 games. They lost in the wild card round because their offense just could not get things going. It looked like they were still in the hotel room. They could never really get any momentum. but a lot of people are saying this is going to be the year that they finally take the division away from the New England Patriots. You take a look at their team, their defense. You could make the argument that it's the best. If you don't think it's the best, it's in the top 3 or the top 5. Their offense has a lot of great players. I think they have a good receiving group. They obviously just brought Stephon Diggs in this offseason through a trade. You have Brown, you have Beasley, you have a pretty solid offensive line. You have a good group of running backs. Devin Singletary, Zach Moss is a guy that they drafted this year in the 3rd round out of Utah. I think that he might end up taking the starting job from Singletary as the year goes on. But the problem with the Bills is they don't have a quarterback. They have a fullback playing quarterback. And that's my main issue with this team. And it's a shame because I really do. I like this team a lot. I like everything they're doing. I love Sean McDermott. I think that everything they're trying to do is great, but this is going to be so cliche. You need a quarterback in the NFL to succeed. And I really don't think Buffalo has that quarterback. We saw it in the playoff game last year. I understand that people can improve this and that, but Matt, he was bad. I said if they had a below average quarterback, they win that game. A below average quarterback, they win that game against Houston. They didn't even have that. They had a guy that doesn't know where the ball is going when he throws it. He's very inconsistent. I struggle to buy into this team fully because of that big question mark they have at the most important position on the field.
Yeah, so I know you are very firm on your position with Josh Allen. I think he still has some years in development to go. I will say, as a divisional opponent, watching him pretty much week in and week out, he has made some plays for that team. Not necessarily throwing the ball. A lot of people praise his ability to run the ball. As a big target, kind of not as much like Cam Newton, but in the sense that he's a bigger guy and harder to bring down. I give him credit for being able to get them to the playoffs because I go back to the first game the Patriots played against the Bills last year. He brought them back and made some plays. Obviously, he got hurt in that game, I think, at 1.2, but he was making the difference. I think you mentioned his arm strength. I think you really got to kind of reel that in a little bit if you're Buffalo. And I don't know how long that takes. We'd probably have to ask like a coach or something how long that takes to kind of change the mechanics to reel that strength in a little bit to where he's not overthrowing guys by 15 yards. But I don't think he's necessarily a guy that you have to just kick to the curb and move on. I think there's still a way to develop him. But I agree that in the sense that this is the year where he's got to kind of come to the table a little bit, especially when you go out and you get a deep threat like Stephon Diggs. You have another fast wide receiver in John Brown. He's not going to throw a lot of balls like a 7-yard slant route. He's going to go down the field on a go route almost every time. But that's why you get Diggs, right? And he's proven that he could be that kind of receiver. And I think Allen's a much better guy to throw the ball to him in that aspect than Kirk Cousins was in Minnesota. I don't know if you disagree with me there, but this is a year that we're going to see. We're going to see if he's a good quarterback or not. I don't necessarily put it on him his first couple of years in the league, even counting this year, maybe even next year. But this is the year where he's got to kind of step up a little bit and kind of be the guy. So they're proven. They're giving him all the weapons. I agree with you that Zach Moss is going to be the running back halfway through the year. But the tools are all there for him, so this is the year he's going to have to go out there and prove himself. Last year, he had the Tom Brady excuse just as the default guy. But this year, he seems to be the guy. Because we don't know what Cam's going to do, and then the other two teams are still trying to rebuild. So he has the expectations, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt until he proves me wrong. But I know you don't like him at all, so...
I tweeted this during the NFL draft, and I'm going to say it verbatim. Bills' current QB room: Josh Allen, H-back; Jake Fromm, assistant QB coach; Matt Barkley, LOL. It's just, I can't be confident in it. Even with the expanded playoffs, I can't be confident in a team making the postseason, let alone a postseason run, with that group of guys in the quarterback room. Now, you look at their schedule, I think it's a possibility they get off to a pretty fast start. You have the Jets and Miami the first 2 weeks. You come back home, you play the Rams before you go out to Vegas and play the Raiders. That's probably 3 wins, maybe 4 if they can pull out a win against the Rams. They have a tough stretch, and they better bank those wins early because they get a tough
Yeah.
stretch the middle of the season. You got Kansas City, you have a game against the Jets, but then New England, Seattle, Arizona, and then the bye week. You come
Yeah,
out of the
but
bye week, you have San Francisco and Pittsburgh waiting for you. So I think I'll say this: if they can bank wins early, they'll be in a good position. But if they struggle out of the gate very early on, they lose a couple games that they shouldn't, it's going to be very tough for this team to recover.
well, Ryan, I'm going to expand that stretch for you. You stopped at Pittsburgh, then back-to-back road games at Denver and New England. So that's a tough stretch to really end out the year from week 6 and on. I even go week 5 at Tennessee also. I don't think that's just a gimme game either. So 4-0 I could see out of those first 4 games, but it's a really, and I thought the Patriots schedule was hard, Ryan, but now I'm looking at this and just the placement of these games. It's a lot more difficult, especially, I'm telling you that back-to-back Denver and New England might decide the division, depending on where the Patriots are. So 3 out of 4 on the road if you count that San Francisco game on Monday Night Football in Week 13. So we'll see. They looked horrible on the road in the playoffs last year. That's why I'm not so confident with them on the road this season. But again, their defense, and I think this is one of the reasons why the Patriots were so good last year too, is because their defense was able to elevate and kind of fill in the holes where the offense was. So even if Josh Allen doesn't live up to what he was, they still have really a top 5 defense with a lot of really talented guys like the Patriots have and had last year too, and that does the same function. So I will see. This turnaround is kind of continuing. They just paid Tre'Davious White that money, or they're giving him that extension. They're buying into this group they have. So this is a really tough schedule, though. I think even that game at Arizona is going to be tough, too. I think Arizona is a much better team than people make them out to be. So, yeah, this is the de facto team, though, right? There's some people who are like you who are very confident in the Patriots, which, again, I appreciate, but this seems to be the de facto team. As soon as Brady left, it's like, okay, the Bills. And I'm like, that's okay, but we need to have some reasoning behind it, not just because they're the next best team. So we'll see. I will say they played us very hard last year, and they're not like a bad team. So in a division with a lot of unproven teams, they could kind of take that to their advantage. So, but this schedule is harder than the Patriots. I will say that.
One of the teams that'll finish behind the Bills and likely the Patriots is the Dolphins, a team that's won 18 games over the past 3 seasons. You can tell that they're kind of, I'd like to say they're in a rebuild mode now, but this is a Dolphins team that over the offseason spent $237 million in free agency, which I have to imagine is the most of any team ever. You might have to fact check that. I know it was the most this decade. And I say this decade, I mean from 2011 to 2020, but that's got to be the most ever for any team. You can tell that they're trying to put a good product out in the field. Brian Flores, a guy that I'd say a lot of people maybe treated unfairly, especially at the beginning of the season, his first year as head coach. But you can tell the players really played hard for him. I mean, even if they didn't win necessarily a lot of games last year, they only won 5. They were in a lot of games, especially later on in the season. And as an Eagles fan, I can tell you that they played very, very competitively. That was a.
Didn't they win that game?
The Dolphins did win that game. Yes, that's correct.
I want to make a point. Go ahead.
I was going to say, now they have a very tough beginning to their schedule. The first 5 weeks, they're playing New England, Buffalo, Jacksonville, Seattle, San Francisco. So this is going to be a team that, gets some wins early and then kind of establishes themselves as, okay, well, maybe they just need to win this many games to get into the playoffs. But you can see everything kind of starting to come together in Miami. It seems like they finally have the coach that they need. It seems like they have a lot of good talent on both sides of the ball. Of course, you have to wait and see, but it seems like they're drafting pretty well. You obviously bring in Tua this year at 5th overall, which I'm happy they did. I'm happy they didn't take Herbert. It seems like things are finally starting to kind of turn around in Miami after so much mediocrity for at least most of our lifetimes. And I think if you're a Dolphins fan, even if you don't win a lot of games this year, I think that you should be excited because I think that a lot of these games will be fun.
I got a bunch of points here that's going to back up your argument here. Shout out to Mike
Perfect.
Trapasso, big Dolphins fan. Mike Trapasso, had to give him the shout out, friend of the program. Point number one on Brian Flores. This, what I'm about to tell you, is a tribute to how great of a coach he is. Right. So for people who don't know, he was the de facto defensive coordinator in New England. He didn't really have the title, but he was the defensive play caller. Then he got the head coaching job uh, at Miami, right? So it's been kind of this carousel of people in New England on the defensive side because Patricia left first, Flores got the bump, then he left, and now we're kind of working through Gerard Mayo and Steve Belichick. That's beside the point. But here's a tribute to how good of a coach he is, right? I'm looking at this roster, and I'm going to rate to you all the people that played on those Patriots teams where Brian Flores was a defensive play caller, or even just on the staff. You ready? And there's guys on the offensive side too. Ted Karras, who was the center, he came over. You have Kyle Van Noy. Eric Rowe at one point was on that team. So right off the bat, 3 guys, right? And there's more too. Shaq Lawson came over. He was another Patriot. So Landon Roberts, another Patriot. So that's 5 guys right off the bat that in one offseason, right, when their contracts expired, came down to play for Brian Flores. So that's a tribute to how good of a coach he is, that they were willing to leave a system that has been proven to work for so long in New England to go follow a guy who's that good of a coach. And I've always said, Brian Flores, and that's another reason why people go follow Patricia in Detroit too. These guys, especially I think this newer wave of the Belichick coaching tree is a little bit different than the Romeo Crennels of the world, to where I think they're going to be, and especially the Bill O'Briens of the world. These guys are much more player friendly. They have their guys back, and they really they really get their guys to play for them. That's point number one. Point number two, in terms of the money they spent in free agency, you look up and down at the moves they made, Ryan, and they're all pretty good free agent signings. It's not like when they signed Sue to that ridiculous contract and everything else. Like Kyle Van Noy, and I'll just talk about the Patriots, and even Eric Flowers too. I feel like the change of scenery is going to really help him kind of establish himself in a low pressure situation. But Ted Karras, one of the better centers in the NFL, they're solid. They're a solid team, and I will apologize to the Dolphins because I was conversing with you a few weeks ago and said they're quote like garbage, but then I had to do my due diligence and I went and looked and I said, this is actually a pretty decent team. You and I will disagree about the quarterback situation. I like Herbert more than Tagovailoa, but we're going to kind of have to see how that plays out. That's the only thing I will disagree with you on. But other than that, it's a testament to how good of a coach Brian Flores is. And I think he's going to be successful. He's going to be the first Belichick disciple. I think he was the first Belichick disciple to win, too. Or no, it was Patricia, but Flores also came through, too. So it's, the future is bright. And I think he's the right guy. And a lot of people questioned it because he only had 1 year as the play caller in New England before he came down. A lot of people thought it was kind of too soon to hire a guy like him. But I don't know. I think he got him to play last year. So you got to give him credit. I don't think it's going to be this year, but Mr. Trapasso is going to be very happy in the years down the road. I don't know, with all the money they spent, how that's going to lock them up down in the future in terms of signing people. But they have a couple weapons on offense to complement Tua in his first year, assuming he's going to get the job eventually. And even if he doesn't work out, you still have Fitzpatrick, who's proven that he could win pretty much anywhere. So it's a solid team. I think they deserve a little more respect than they're getting.
Mike Trapasso might end up being happy, and we both think that he will be. Our friends that are Jets fans probably won't be happy for at least a little while longer. They are probably going to round out this AFC East. Matt, I don't know. So there's this funny thing that Warren Sharp said. So the 2018 Jets offense ranked 29th in overall offensive efficiency. It was a disaster. So naturally, they tried to fix it. They added Jameson Crowder and Le'Veon Bell. So the 2019 Jets offense finished 31st in overall offensive efficiency. This team is a mess. I think from top to bottom, last year it was an entire mess. And to their credit, they brought in new front office guys. They're clearly trying to fix whatever the problem is. they still have Adam Gase there. I think until he leaves, this team is never going to reach its full potential. Not that they have a very high ceiling this year, regardless, but still, he doesn't deserve to be a head coach in the NFL anymore. You have Sam Darnold. It's I understand that we talked about this actually a couple weeks ago, and I think our first podcast episode. I understand that he's had a lot of issues that he's had to deal with in his first years here in the league, between the coaching staffs and the mono and the seeing ghosts, all the bad weapons. I get that, but you're starting to get to a make or break point with him. So he hasn't looked super great. He's flashed a little bit, but you really want to see more out of him. You look at the way this roster is constructed, where the talent is, especially now without Jamal Adams. This isn't a very good team, at least on paper. I find it very hard to believe that they're going to finish anywhere that's not last in this division. I think that some of their draft picks are kind of interesting. I don't know if they're going to pan out. The guy like Mekhi Becton, he was kind of that guy where people said, "Oh, well, you can see the talent and the hype, but is it going to translate?" Denzel Mims had some concerns of his own. That was their second round pick. They bring in Brashad Perriman in free agency. They signed George Fant in free agency because the offensive line last year. I was talking to Dylan McGilloway about this one day. Their offensive line, you could have put traffic cones out there last year and they would have been more effective. And I mean that seriously. It was very bad. But I think that this team, they're not like a year away like the Dolphins. They're at least 3, I would say. I know things can change quickly in the NFL, but it's going to take this team a while to kind of build up and be respectable, in my opinion.
I'm going to keep my thing short, just because you kind of said it best, and just so we don't reach that 2-hour mark again. That's still a goal of ours, by the way. We're still trying. The Jets stink. I'm just going to put it bluntly.
I guess I could have just said it like that. Yeah. Okay.
They Darnold, I agree, make or break season. They do have an elite quarterback, and I mean this jokingly, as their backup in Joe Flacco. And then the whole Jamal Adams thing too. They're a mess. In both New York teams are in their own respect, but they suck. We could just move on. We don't need to spend too much time on them. I feel bad for Le'Veon Bell in some ways, that this is the team that he picked to go to. Because you're wasting away the last years of your prime with Jamison Crowder, Sam Darnold, and Denzel Mims. Like, congratulations. Like, that's what you moved for. And I get you went for the money, but you're not going to win anything. So they suck.
So we're going to move to the AFC North. No, I probably could have just said that as well and not given them the time of day. I think it would have been the same thing. But let's move to the North. This is another team that we don't really need to talk about a lot, because you could argue they're the most talented roster on paper in the entire league. It's the Baltimore Ravens. They went 14-2 last year, but they got upset in the divisional round by the Titans, which nobody expected. But you take a look at this team. You obviously have Lamar Jackson, who's going to be an MVP candidate. They have a lot of great weapons on offense. You have Boykin, you have Brown. Mark Andrews is there as your tight end, a very good offensive line, great running backs in Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, who I think is going to make an impact this year. The defense is obviously very good. Matt, this team is likely, they'll compete with the Chiefs, but this might end up being, once again, the number 1 seed in the AFC, home field advantage. And I'll say this, it would be a little surprising if they don't make the Super Bowl this year. I'm very high on the Ravens.
I think we're approaching the territory of Lamar Jackson in the playoffs becoming kind of an inside joke. This is the year where he's kind of got to step up, right? Because you remember the Chargers deal 2 years ago, and then obviously this year, or last year, I mean, with Tennessee, 2 games that they should have won on paper. So we're really approaching to where he's got to avoid that in year 3. I love their offensive line, Ryan. I think that's what really makes a difference. You got guys like Ronnie Stanley, Orlando Brown, DJ Fluker, a guy that's found a lot of success there. And the defense is kind of in this revival too. Obviously, they had all those days with Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. It's coming back to. I give all the credit to John Harbaugh in some ways, because that was not a generally accepted decision to move from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson in some ways, right? Because you kind of have to overhaul everything you're doing. And there's some people out there who still don't think Lamar Jackson is a good quarterback, which makes me concerned. I put them in the category as the people who don't wear the mask properly. Those people are in the same category. I think, yeah, Baltimore, they just need to execute in the playoffs. That's my only thing with them. I'm not going to harp on it too much because the team's all there. They're exponentially better than everyone in their division. It's just execute in the playoffs, just like the Saints need to. We'll talk about them on Wednesday and then in my article on Tuesday. But that's the only thing is that I have to critique this team is they just have not shown up in the playoffs. But this could be the year. I agree that we're destined and we hopefully will get a Kansas City-Baltimore AFC Championship game. That'll be really good to see.
So a team that's a little more interesting to talk about in terms of the AFC North is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who went 8-8 a season ago without any type of quarterback competency for the entire season. They had to rotate through Mason Rudolph and Devlin Duck Hodges, and that was just a mess for both of them. But you get Ben Roethlisberger back this year. Now, the question is obviously, what does he have left in the tank? I think that's actually what Zach Cosenza said in his preview. Because we don't know. This is a guy that we haven't seen in a very long time. He's obviously very old now. So you don't know. You don't know how he's going to be coming back from the surgery that he had. But to his credit, I think that his offensive line should be pretty solid. He has, I think, some weapons at receiver. You have Deontay Johnson, James Washington, and Juju obviously still there in the slot. I think the group of running backs is a good one. I'm not sure if any of them are going to stand out as like a bell cow type of guy, but I think if they do it by committee, that's a good group. And obviously their defense, which is the reason they got 8 wins last year in the first place, it's very good. It's one of the better defensive units in all of the league. They have, I'd say you look at their schedule, you obviously have to play Baltimore twice, which isn't going to be easy, but I mean, outside of that, there's a lot of winnable games here, and especially with 7 teams being able to make the playoffs this year, I think it's very possible that we see Mike Tomlin and the Steelers team back in the postseason.
One fact check on myself. DJ Fluker signed this offseason with Baltimore. Thought he was there last season. One fact check, a CNN fact check on myself, so I had to correct me there.
Respect.
But hey, we're all for accuracy. Honestly thought he was there. But regardless, they had a good offensive line last year, one of the best in the league anyway.
Yeah.
And is a guy that had some off-field issues, but has proven on the field to be a reliable guy. So it'll be interesting to see with those off-field issues and everything going into Baltimore. I think that's why he was released from Seattle, right? Any case, Pittsburgh, they almost made it to the postseason with that ugly iteration of a team last year that was injured all over the place, and the defense was just scoring like 20 points a game, and offense wasn't really doing much. And then you add a bunch of guys back. Yeah, I agree, Ryan. This is a team that you can look and say like 9-7 and sneak into the wild card. Like that's what I look at this team and say. Like you look at the whole Fitzpatrick thing last year, the Minka Fitzpatrick addition, and what he did to that defense is a pretty much a top 5 defense. And whatever you can still get out of Big Ben, I guess, is a good thing. Which is, I mean, sure, I don't like have any invested one way or the other on him as a quarterback, but he's much better than the other two on the roster. So, yeah, I see a potential 9-win team right here as long as he stays healthy. If he gets hurt again, I really just, I guess it's not an if because it happens almost every year. You don't want to wish that on anyone, but yeah, they're a solid team. They're just like a middle of the pack team that'll probably get blown out by Baltimore in the first round of the playoffs. So, or Kansas City, whoever's that 2 seed, they're going to get absolutely annihilated by. So good for them, I guess.
The team that'll compete with the Steelers for a second in the division that I think could end up being better is the Cleveland Browns. This was a team that had a lot of hype last year, and clearly none of it worked out. I bought into that hype. I think I said they were going to finish second in the division at 11-5. I might have said they were going to win the division. I'm not sure. I'd have to go check. But I was very high on them, regardless. And
you were drinking the Kool-Aid with
yes, I
Baker
was.
Mayfield. You were, I think all of America was. It wasn't just you.
Yeah.
And I think pretty much everyone except me was very high on the Browns.
Well, Matt, you were right because they went 6-10. They completely disappointed everybody. Least of all, it was a very disappointing season. But they realized that Freddie Kitchens wasn't working, so they made a change, which was good. They didn't hold on to him longer than they had to. They bring in Kevin Stefanski, who I think is going to make a big difference. I think that the way he's going to scheme this offense, I think it'll help Baker out a ton. You still have talent on this team, obviously, and you improve the offensive line this year at both tackle spots by drafting who I thought was the best tackle prospect in the draft in Jedrick Wills out of Alabama and signing Jack Conklin for $14 million a year from the Titans. The defense still has talent on it. You have, I'd say, arguably the best running back duo in the league in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. As long as Baker is a competent quarterback, as long as he kind of gets back to where he flashed during his rookie year as opposed to what happened last year, I think this is, I'm not going to say this team's going to surprise people because it seems like people are expecting them to improve, but I really do think that this is a team that could end up being the most surprising for a lot of people this year.
So why I still am not high on Cleveland is because I am, but in the respect that I have a big motto of show me, don't tell me when it comes to teams that have these expectations. There's a reason why everyone picks the Patriots to win the division every year, because they go out and prove it every year. A team in Cleveland that, and obviously a lot of it falls on Freddie Kitchens. I think a lot of us objectively could have looked at that and said people are trying to really reach to justify that hire at the time. I think the Stefanski addition, Ryan, it reminds me similar to Frank Reich in the Colts in some ways, in terms of a guy that can really kind of come in and bring a fresh outlook onto things, especially for a team in Cleveland who's went through, I couldn't even tell you the number of head coaches since we started high school, Ryan. It has to be at least 5. It has to be since we started high school. And granted, that's 8 years ago, right? Because I don't want to run through them all, but like Chudzinski, Kitchens, Hugh Jackson, there's 3 right off the bat. So I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker, is bringing him in. If Baker, listen, it'll go as far as he takes them. And if not, I think Nick Chubb's just going to put the team on his back and do it himself. Do I think they're going to be on the same level as the Steelers? Probably. But again, they have a higher ceiling, I agree with you, but they also have a lower basement in terms of where they could fall, as opposed to Pittsburgh. So they got to go out there and prove it to me this year. Because if it's not this year, Ryan, then I don't know what this franchise could possibly do with having Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, and Austin Hooper as offensive weapons, and Kareem Hunt. Like, if Baker can't do it with that, and Kevin Stefanski as his head coach, like, I don't know, I know you love Baker Mayfield. I can't defend him if he can't win with this core and this head coach. I
was very high on Baker last year. There was a question in the summer of 2019 that said, what quarterbacks, if any, would you take over Carson Wentz? And I had Baker Mayfield as one of those quarterbacks. Clearly, I might have jumped the gun a little bit. Possibly. Maybe I did. Who's to say? But I agree. If he is not able with this team, with the new coach, who's probably going to scheme to his strengths,
you literally you can't put a better team out there for him. And you even go out and get the guys, as you said, Wills in a draft and then Conklin in free agency. You literally can't do anything else to make this team better. It falls on him. The expectations are on him. The blame is going to go on him if he can't win it this year.
I agree.
There should be no finger pointing to anywhere other than Baker Mayfield if this team doesn't work this year. I'm sorry. You can't blame it on Odell or for his antics or whatever, or if Jarvis Landry wants to be there or not. No. This is his year, and I don't like when people will defend this guy to the grave. I get it. He's a great player, and he's an exciting player. But for a guy who was picked and praised as high as he was, you got to do it with this team, right? Like, for a number 1 pick to have in his second or third year, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Austin Hooper, Kareem Hunt, and then an offensive line that has Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills on it. Like, Sam Darnold would love to have something like that. Josh Rosen clearly would love to have something like that. So guys that were kind of picked in his draft class, like, you gotta go out there and do it this year, man. Like, I'm tired of people defending this team, and people had them going like 12-4 last year, winning the division. I'm like, get out of here, man. Like, it's
Oops.
I'm not calling you out. I'm calling out, like,
No, I'll call out myself. That was not a smart thing to do. But
and even people a couple years prior were high on the Browns too. You just got to go out there and show me, because until then, I'm going to sit there and just pound my fist and say Baltimore and Pittsburgh, because I know exactly what I'm going to get out of those two teams.
To answer your question from earlier, they've had 7 coaches since we started high school in 2011. Jesus. Pat Shurmur, Chudzinski, Mike Pettin, Hugh Jackson, Greg Williams, Freddie Kitchens, and now Stefanski. So we'll see if Stefanski is the right one. I hope he is. For that fan base, I hope that this is finally the group that they need, because they've gone through so much. But
there are some great names on that list. Mike Pettin. There are great names on that list for sure.
So rounding out the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that you can kind of look at, you can see that they're doing. It looks like they're kind of building pretty well, I would say, based on what they've done. You obviously bring in Joe Burrow, who had the best season in college football history as a quarterback. He will be starting for them. Hopefully he's the answer at quarterback. They had Dalton for a number of years since 2011, and he obviously flashed, but it just never really worked out. So hopefully Burrow can kind of lead this team. They signed Trey Waynes to come in and be one of their starting cornerbacks. They signed DJ Reader to be a big part of their defensive line. So they spent $6 million to bring in Von Bell as kind of, some good depth, maybe kind of like a hybrid kind of guy. So they have some good players. You still have AJ Green there. Tyler Boyd showed he had a lot of talent a year ago. T. Higgins is a guy that, if Burrow and him can kind of get some chemistry together early, that could be kind of a fun connection to watch as time goes on. Joe Mixon, who's one of the best running backs in the game right now. They're not going to win a lot this year, obviously, but if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm cautiously optimistic for the future.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this team. I think some people are a little too high on them this year in terms of win totals. I think they're still going to lose a lot of games. I don't think just bringing in a rookie quarterback, regardless of what he did last year, is going to dramatically change the win total from a year prior. I agree that they're moving in the right direction. I think T. Higgins is a good weapon for Joe Burrow for the future. They held on to Andy Dalton as long as they could. I think Dalton was the victim of some poor coaching at some points. With Marvin Lewis, I don't think all the blame needs to go on him, but it's a new era. Hopefully this is the year that Zach Taylor could kind of start to implement things with his guy at quarterback and everything else. So a couple of years, but I've seen as high as like 6 or 7 wins. I don't know about that, but they're getting there. So
we'll move to the wonderful, everyone's favorite division, the AFC South.
Yeah, let's not subject people to too much time on this division if we don't have to, because it's a mess.
We'll start with the Titans. Now, this is a team this is the Bills if the Bills had a quarterback. I really like the Titans, and I think that Tannehill is a perfect quarterback for this team. I was high on Tannehill going back to Miami when a lot of people weren't. So I'm glad that he finally got to kind of show out last year. Now that you could say what you want about the contract that he got, but I think that they needed to keep him based on this team and the way they've built it. I think Mike Vrabel, he's proven himself to be a pretty competent head coach. I understand, 4 straight years of 9-7 records. That might not seem very appealing initially, but I think that this is kind of an example of the team kind of playing better than their record might indicate. I think they have one of the better offensive coordinators in football in Arthur Smith. I think we saw that last year. You have one of the best running backs in the league in Derrick Henry. Naturally, you bring in Darrington Evans, who I think is going to be good out of the backfield for them in terms of catching passes. AJ Brown really showed off last year. Everyone can now knows how much talent that he has. Corey Davis is still there. You do lose Jack Conklin. You replace him with Isaiah Wilson in the draft out of Georgia. You bring in who I thought was one of the more intriguing prospects on the defensive side at cornerback in Christian Fulton out of LSU in the second round. This is a very intriguing team to me. This is a team that when they've made the playoffs over the past several years, they've kind of impressed. They've made it further than people thought they would, and especially last year. Not only do they upend New England and Foxborough, they go into Baltimore and they beat them too, and they made it to the AFC Championship game. I'm excited about the Titans. Even if they go 9-7 somehow for a fifth straight year, this is a team in the playoffs that I don't think anybody wants to play because they're going to make it very tough on you. And this is, I'm not going to say they're a dark horse team because obviously they do have some expectations, but this is another team that could maybe surprise people more than what they're thinking.
They play like their coach, smash mouth football. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be flashy like Kansas City and Baltimore, but they're going to win games. And I like that style of football. I can respect it. And obviously adding Jadeveon Clowney into that mix is going to really kind of be interesting on the defensive side of the ball. They still have a couple big names there too, including guys like Kenny Vaccaro, Malcolm Butler. It's a solid team, and especially if you were able to preserve Derrick Henry until the last couple months of the season like they did last year, it's really going to benefit them. I agree that you kind of had to throw the money at Tannehill. I still think he's a better option than Mariota regardless, just because I don't think Mariota is really an NFL quarterback. So I think now that they have at least a step closer to an NFL quarterback in Ryan Tannehill, all he has to do is go in there and manage the game. I think that'll be good enough to win this division, which is, as we talked about, just a weird mess. But they'll be there. I think the way that they call plays and run the ball, running the ball, listen, will keep you in any game, unless you're playing against Kansas City. But if you can effectively run the ball, it'll still keep you at pace with the team, even if you're not at the same talent level, just because you're draining out the clock, you're putting the defense on the field longer. So that style of football, and you and I saw it on the high school level when you and I used to do high school football all those years ago. And even at the college level, if you could effectively run the football, I think that's more valuable than being able to pass the ball, just because of it being able to compensate for a lack of talent compared to your opponent. So it'll really benefit them. I think the Conklin loss, though, is going to be something to keep a pin on, just in case, though. So, yeah, I'm a big Mike Vrabel fan, so I'm happy for him. I'm happy if anyone was to end the Tom Brady era, it would be a Patriot. So, there you go.
I want to talk about the Colts next because I think that they are a very, very intriguing team. I think they are a team that could compete for a division title this year. Normally, when you lose your franchise generational quarterback, like the Colts did not even last offseason, last preseason, a couple weeks before the season actually started, you're probably not going to be in a good position. And yet they still were able to win 7 games in 2019. They have a very good team built on both sides of the ball. They have a nice running back duo they can go with rookie Jonathan Taylor, who South Jersey represent. He went to Salem. Marlon Mack, who is still going to get a lot of time. You have an interesting receiving core. T.Y. Hilton obviously still there, but you bring in Pittman. You have Campbell. The defense is. It seems like they're kind of starting to get the respect they deserve, but I think they should probably get some more respect because I think this could be a very, very good unit this year. And not to mention, you bring in Phillip Rivers. Now, he's obviously an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett. What does he still have left? What's he going to look like? I don't know. But if there's any coaching staff that's going to be able to put him in a position to succeed, I think it's going to be Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni. I think that they're going to be able to scheme this offense to make him look the best he has in a while. I've always been a Phillip Rivers guy. I thought that he always got a little bit of disrespect just because of where he played and how the team did. I really don't think it was all his fault, but I'm excited to see what he can do with this team. And if I did have to pick a dark horse team to maybe advance deep into the AFC playoffs, I think it would probably be the Colts. I think they definitely have that potential.
don't think it's a dark horse team, Ryan. This is a team that, if you look at where they were last year, when we thought Andrew Luck was going to be the quarterback, they were a Super Bowl contender. A lot of people had them as one of the favorites in the AFC because of all the weapons they had around them, and it was people were very high on the Colts. And then obviously he retired. They felt pressured to sign Brissett, roll with him, whatever. Yeah, they still won a bunch of games with him and Brian Hoyer at quarterback, so you got to give him credit. But you put in a guy like Phillip Rivers right into there. Obviously, he's a different, not comparable player to Andrew Luck, but it's still pretty much the same team that was there last year when we were all saying this is a team that could really throw around with the AFC heavyweights and everything. And I mean, you get a younger kicker now too, which I think will really benefit them, especially on the road, in Rodrigo Blankenship. And then you mentioned all the weapons around Rivers. I don't think it's a dark horse. I think this is a team that should win the AFC South. To be brutally honest with you, I mean, it's really not too much of a different team than last year, in my eyes, at least, in terms of the guys that were going to make an impact. And I think even they added some pieces too. Obviously, you had Darius Leonard, who's playing at an unbelievable level on the defensive side of the ball. You bring in DeForest Buckner as well. It's a pretty solid offensive line too. I think this is the de facto favorite, and I think it's. I'm not going to say it's obvious, but I think it should be there that they're a better team than Tennessee is on paper. I think you and I might disagree on that, but I think Indy should win this division.
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. I guess we can talk about Houston now.
I left you speechless there. I didn't know if I threw a hot take out there. I thought it was a pretty pretty
I
fair
agree
take.
100%. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. I'm just I don't know how to quite introduce Houston.
I can introduce them. I'll take this one off your hands.
Okay.
Bill O'Brien, you suck. You trade
That's
away.
Fair.
Trade away like the best.
I guess we're not going to get him on for an interview now. So
no, he could come on and defend.
I was going to say that.
Receiver, I'll say it for you.
Okay.
What the hell? What the hell, man? I'll take the view of a Houston Texans fan. What the hell, man? What do you got against the Houston fans trading away literally every single good player that they have year in and year out? I'm surprised they kept Deshaun Watson and gave him all that money. I'm surprised he's not the next one going out. Like the David Johnson thing with Hopkins, I really to this day I just have no idea. And the crazy reality of it, Ryan, is that this is still like a decent team, and because of the division they're in, they're going to be in the wild card race and in that position to where they could win the division just because of who they're playing. Like I don't think they're exponentially worse than like Indy or Tennessee. I think, and every single game in the AFC South is going to be Sunday at 1:00. Spiro Ditas or Andrew Catalan is going to be calling it. It's going to be 17-16 the final score every single game. So, I like you bring in Brandon Cooks, whatever. He's been on like 4 teams in 4 years. David Johnson, I don't get that. Even the Duke Johnson spot behind him, I don't really understand that either. Bill O'Brien makes no sense. I introduced him there for you. Coming from a more non-statistical thing, you're more analytical. I'm more just look at it and be like, what the hell? That's like, it's indefensible trading away DeAndre Hopkins. And that's going to come back to haunt them, and Arizona is going to win a lot of games this year because of him, compared to if they didn't have him. So there you go. I introduced him for you.
This team, I agree that on paper, there's clearly some talent here, but there's just so many head-scratching decisions that Bill O'Brien has made over the past couple of years, not even just off the field, but some of the things he does when he's actually coaching, it makes me scratch my head a little bit too. This is a team that could conceivably start 0-4. You're away at Kansas City on opening night. You have to come home and play Baltimore. You're away at Pittsburgh. You're home against Minnesota. You get to play Jacksonville week 5, but then you have to travel to Tennessee. You have to play Green Bay to your bye. Conceivably, I can see a scenario where this team loses 6 of their first 7 games. How likely is that to happen? Probably not very likely. They'll probably get at least 3, maybe 4 wins out of that.
Well,
But
when I did one of those season simulators and picked all the individual games, they started 1-3 in my. I gave them.
and
I gave
it's
them
very
Minnesota.
hard. It's very hard to come back from a 1-3 start, even with an extra wild card team this year, the 7 seed. It wouldn't be easy to come back from a 1-3 start. That would take a lot of hard work.
Well, it would be much easier to do if you had the best wide receiver in the league, right?
Well, now you have David Johnson, who was a good running back 3 years ago, so that's
Well, he's
good.
a good running back for like 2 weeks, and then he gets hurt, and then you forget he plays. You draft him like in the first round of your fantasy football draft, and then week 2 he like pulls a hamstring, and then week 15 it's like, oh, he's out for the season for a hamstring issue or
That
something.
sounds like you're speaking from experience.
Uh, actually, no, I've never
No.
ever had a really high picked like that to get a running back ever in my fantasy drafts. I've always been like middle, late first round. But in any case, this is what I talk about of kind of the old era of the Belichick coaching tree and the new era. This is where the dividing line is with Bill O'Brien. He's the last of the old guys like Romeo Crennel and even Josh McDaniels, who's going to get a new chance. But I don't know. If I'm a Texans fan, man, I'd be really pissed off. Is you replace DeAndre Hopkins, and it's not even like you're replacing him because you had Will Fuller there, and then you have Kenny Stills, obviously, but Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb. I'd rather have just DeAndre Hopkins than those 4 guys because he's proven week in and week out what he could do, and then you basically take a step down from that. You take a weapon away from your guy that you just pumped all this money to in Deshaun Watson to bring in a running back who, as you mentioned, was fantastic in like 20 whatever. Not this year. That's for sure. Or past however many years. So yeah, I don't know. They'll still kind of fight around because you get to play the Jaguars twice a year. So, but it's confusing. It's confusing what they do. And it's frustrating even as just a Patriots fan to just see a team just actively make stupid decisions year in and year out.
I'm glad you brought up the Jaguars. We're going to transition to them before we move on to the AFC West. They're going to be a fun team to watch this year. They're not going to be good. They might win 5 or 6 games, but they're going to be fun. Which I think is, especially for a market like that, is kind of big. I thought they should have gotten rid of Doug Marrone. They didn't do that, but they did bring in a new offensive coordinator in Jay Gruden, who is a guy that I kind of wanted the Eagles to look at if they were going to go that route. Of course, the Eagles did not get him, but they were able somehow to trade Nick Foles to the Bears. I don't know how they managed to do that. Clearly, it was a good decision. And you have now Gardner Minshew, who's going to be in his first full season as a starting quarterback in this league. And everyone can, they can joke around about him, the Uncle Rico, the mustache, whatever. He has some clear limitations, but for a team like Jacksonville, who's probably not going to win a lot of games, he's a fun quarterback to watch for that team. And I think that he's, he can throw the ball, he'll run the ball a little bit. He has an interesting wide receiving core with DJ Chark, Dede Westbrook, Chris Conley still there. They drafted Laviska Shenault. I think the offense is going to be kind of interesting to watch, especially now that Fournette's not there. The defense, now that Ngakoue is not there anymore, now someone else is going to have to step up. But they have some pieces on that side too. So this is one of those
teams. That's very kind of you to say.
Well, they have C.J. Henderson. They have you still have Miles Jack. You bring in.
I'm not to be too hard on them, but if you look at the team that really pushed New England in the AFC title game just a couple years ago, almost all those guys on the defensive side of the ball are gone. Like I get you have Josh Allen, I get you have Miles Jack, but I don't know. You're losing a lot more than you're bringing back in my opinion. And obviously you weren't going to be able to pay all those guys, and some of them just weren't working out there. But you're losing a lot more than you're replacing with for this defense. So
Yeah, but they're in a rebuild, and I think you give them a couple, 2-3 years, and
it's
I
just
think they could
crazy.
build a similar defense.
I'm just shocked that it's 2020 and in 2017 and in 2018 they were a team that was really kind of pushing New England, and then in 2018, at least the first part of it, were a solid, really good team, and you're already in a rebuild.
Well, if they didn't hitch their wagon to Blake Bortles, if they weren't so, what's the word I'm looking for? If they weren't so stubborn, and if they actually tried to find a good quarterback, and I don't mean signing Nick Foles to that contract either, because that wasn't the answer.
Oh yeah,
If they actually tried to find, listen, I know it's easier said than done to find a good quarterback in the NFL, but
you could even
everybody
get
knew that Blake Bortles wasn't the option, and yet they said, "Oh, you know what? We made the AFC Championship game. Fuck it, let's bring him back.
dude. You
He
could have put
he's the guy that we need."
you could put Case Keenum in there. He would have played better, or even Kirk Cousins. And I'm just naming like mediocre guys, but
They
better.
only have themselves to blame, as you said. They had the core in place for this team to be good for I'm not going to say a long time, because NFL, it stands for not for long. Things can change very quickly, just like that. But you just they had the pieces, and they screwed it up. And there's a lot of teams that would have, they were envious. They would have loved to be in Jacksonville's position.
And even at the
And
time with Fournette, at the time, I say at the time, very liberally with Leonard Fournette, because obviously they released him and then he's in Tampa now. But to have at the time a running back who could kind of move the ball, and then a defense that was balling out, it's to me, it seems like such a dramatic shift. I get it, not things don't last forever, but at the same time, it's just a very dramatic change. So I don't know how many games this team's going to win this year. Probably not a lot, but I think they're going to be a bottom feeder for a couple of years for sure in this division.
so we'll move to the AFC West, a team that we don't need to talk about a lot. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They won the Super Bowl. They bring a lot of people back. They sign a lot of guys to contract extensions. This team's going to be together for a while. They have the very good coaching staff. They have a great front office. They bring in a guy that should probably be a mainstay in their offense for a while in the draft. They spend a first-round pick on running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. You have Mahomes. Man, this is a team that'll probably win 12 or
Yeah,
13 games this year.
yeah.
They're very good.
For the sake of time, Chiefs good. There we go.
They might win the Super Bowl again.
Yeah,
So we're gonna move
yeah.
on and
Chiefs good.
to a team that's become very intriguing recently, and I say recently in terms of within the last year. It's the Denver Broncos. They for so long this team could not find a quarterback. And they were lucky that they came into Peyton Manning and got the last couple good years out of him. And even the year they won the Super Bowl, he wasn't good, but they still won. But now they have this guy in Drew Lock who seems like he could become a dependable, I'll say, I think it's fair, starting quarterback in the NFL. They're surrounding him with good weapons. They bring in Jerry Jeudy, their first round pick, who a lot of people thought was probably the best wide receiver in the draft. He went 15th overall. Then they go wide receiver again in round number 2. They pick KJ Hamler out of Penn State. You bring in Melvin Gordon. You still have Philip Lindsay. Royce Freeman's kicking around. The defense, it's not the old Broncos defense, but I think it can still be a solid unit. This is a team that I think could maybe sneak. By the way, I want to give credit to Vic Fangio as a head coach. I thought that he did very well in his first year out there in Denver. A lot of people said, it's this old guy, defensive minded. You don't want him. I think he was respectable in his first season. You bring in Pat Shurmur as the new offensive coordinator. This is a team that I think could maybe sneak their way into the playoffs and maybe do something.
Yeah,
What that something is, I don't know, but I think they could very well sneak their way in.
they could get up to 9-7. I could see that. The additions they made offensively, I think, is what puts them over the edge. 'Cause you could kind of see it in moments when Drew Lock played last year. For like, wow, like this could be like a pretty decent team. And I think Melvin Gordon in a change of scenery Obviously, he kind of did it more for like the petty route, just to spite the Chargers to go within the division. But still, as a Melvin Gordon fantasy player, having him on my team still won me some games. Still a pretty decent guy to have, especially for Drew Lock, who's going to be in his first full season at the helm. It was a running joke for a while, as you mentioned, at the quarterback position. But if everything goes right, I could see like between 7 to 9 wins. They're definitely going to benefit from the fact that it's Kansas City, then a huge gap, and then everyone else. So they could really take advantage of those two teams below them. And I think if he being Locke kind of takes that step, I really love Cortland Sutton, by the way, a guy you had on your fantasy team last year, who I
Yes.
have grown to really love as a wide receiver. He went to Indiana, right? I'm not overthinking that. I could check. I have it right here. I think it was Indiana guy. SMU. Okay, I was wrong. There's
Close
another.
enough.
Huh?
Close enough.
There's another. I think they had an Indiana guy at one point, but in any case,
Same country.
yeah, it's a different conference though. But yeah, you have a nice complement of running backs. This is another thing to where you're starting not like the Baker Mayfield realm of weapons, but like you're giving them some options to work with, right? To where you have young receivers in Sutton and Judy, to where you're going to grow with the quarterback, which I think it is kind of vital. And when you have receivers that are like Beckham and Landry, and then Mayfield, who's kind of like just getting his feet wet, it's going to be kind of a learning curve. But now you could kind of make a universal curve for this young team. And then you have a veteran running back in there in Gordon. So yeah, they can mess around and sneak into the wild card. It depends how the AFC North, I think, shakes out depending on Cleveland and Pittsburgh. I think, or even the South too. It depends on a lot of other teams. But they could be in the mix. For how long, I'm not sure, but they could be there.
So the Charger. So I like how you brought it up. So the Chiefs, they're very high up. The Broncos, there's a little bit of a gap. They're below the Chiefs, and then it kind of falls off a little more. I'd say a little more drastically. The Chargers, they have a very good defense. If Derwin James had not gotten injured, it probably could have challenged to be the best one in the league. But even without him, it's still very, very good. On offense, you have Keenan Allen, you have Hunter Henry, you have the combination of Eckler and Justin Jackson at running back. You don't have your quarterback right now. They're going to start with Tyrod Taylor, who's going to be, naturally he's a little conservative. You have Justin Herbert waiting in the wings. We talked about this earlier. You're high on him. I'm not very high on him. We'll see what happens.
You didn't watch Hard Knocks? Got a great spiral. You throw great football.
Good for him. I'd love to see him do it in an actual NFL game. It's a shame, Matt, because it for years I keep just waiting for this organization to take the next step. Like it seems like they've continuously had a lot of talent on paper for a very long time. They just never been able to like get over that hump, and now they kind of had to take a step back. They lose their franchise quarterback in Philip Rivers, who, as we said, is now a Colt. So now they're going to have to hope that Herbert's the answer, because if he's not, that's going to set them back another few years. I don't know. I'd say that if I knew what I was going to get out of Tyrod, and if I knew when they would hand the reins over to Herbert, maybe they could get a wild card spot, but I don't know. I just can't see them getting over 500 with this roster, especially on offense.
It's just funny how many games they've squandered in the fourth quarter. Not even since high school. You could just go back like a couple years for us. It's over in double digits just in terms of games in the fourth quarter that they squandered, or they're furiously coming back, which was always the Philip Rivers mode. Down by 17 going into the fourth quarter, and somehow it's like a 3-point game. And you see it on Red Zone as like the last game of the day. And Derwin James injury, I think it is really big in the sense that you're losing a huge piece on defense, and puts a little bit more pressure on everyone else to kind of stay healthy. They have a lot of good guys on the defensive side of the ball. I think Herbert can at least be serviceable. Do I think he's going to be worth what he was picked at? No, but I think he can manage the game. I think he could throw a pretty decent ball. So, and it's better than the Philip Rivers spiral they had for years. Yeah, it's just confusing. I agree. They've been good really since like 2007, 2006. They were kicking around for a long time, and for a while they really were able to reload talent, right? They eventually kind of replaced the older group of like LT and everyone with some of these younger guys like Gordon, Keenan Allen, and for whatever reason, they just special teams or whatever the thing was that year just continued to bite them. So I give Anthony Lynn some credit for what he's got to do there, but it's going to be rough for. It's not like they have fans anyway. I mean, no one shows up to their games to begin with, so they might have an advantage there, I guess. But yeah, it's confusing. It's one of those things to where you just don't know why they can't put it together, and we'll never know. But the whole Young Wei Koo thing with the special teams when they signed him, then he sucked. Good for him. He found a place where he's going to be the guy now. But that whole situation 2 or 3 years ago, and Rivers not being the productive guy he used to be. So I don't know. They're just not going to be good.
Another team that probably will not be good, the final team that we're going to talk about in this podcast episode, and as I said, we'll get to the NFC on Wednesday, is the Las Vegas Raiders. John Gruden now in his third year of his 10-year mega contract. They're building in the right way. They did something a little questionable yesterday where they let go of Lynn Bowden and let him go to the Dolphins. I can't say I really understood that. They're trying to make him work as a running back, which is weird because he's a receiver. I didn't quite understand that, but despite all that, the quarterback is obviously a major question mark. They signed Marcus Mariota to an AAV of $8 million, $8.8 million to back up Carr. We'll see if he actually gets in as the starting quarterback this year because I'm not very high on Carr. But you can tell they're trying to surround whoever the quarterback is with talent. You have a great tight end in Darren Waller, who broke out last year. You draft Henry Ruggs, 12th overall out of Alabama. You have Hunter Renfrow. You have Josh Jacobs, who proved himself to be one of the better young running backs in the league a season ago. You have some talent on the defensive side. They're kind of starting to retool on that side, which is something they need to do for a little bit now. They're another team, maybe 6-7 wins, I guess, but they're still one of those teams that's a couple of years away from actually doing something interesting, doing something productive.
Yeah, they have some.
I think
they have some pretty decent guys defensively, right? Jonathan Abram, a guy who a lot of people were confident in his abilities in the draft. Corey Littleton, a guy that has proven himself a little bit in the league. I mean, it's another team. I think they would have really benefited from having fans in the stands this year to at least kind of get these younger guys kind of excited because it's kind of just like a weird collection of players because you have those young players, then you have guys like Trent Brown and like Richie Incognito, and it's just like a really strange mix of like players and also guys off the field. It's just a very weird mix of people. Yeah, I don't really get and then obviously the whole Derek Carr thing too. That doesn't really make sense when you put some of those guys around him. We are an anti Derek Carr podcast.
Yes. No disrespect. No disrespect.
Like
he's a great guy.
I like Jacobs. I like Ruggs. I like Renfro. I think Waller. I don't think he's going to be as great as he was for certain stretches last year. You have some good players on the offensive line, sure. I as a Patriots fan, I miss Trent Brown, but wasn't going to pay him all that money. So it's just a weird collection of players based off their skill set. So sorry, Zach Asenza, a friend of the show, who I'm going to plug his podcast. Go check out his entry level experience. They just dropped their first episode a couple days ago. But sorry, Zach, your Raiders aren't going to be too good this year. You had your chance, and then Derek Carr broke his leg. So sorry. It's
yeah, I agree. So that was our AFC preview.
Yeah, look at us. We're like an hour and 20 minutes in. We're already drastically improved from last week.
we got through 16 teams in an hour and 19 minutes. So I told you guys we finally figured it out. We went through some practice. We did a lot of workouts, and we are ready to go. We did like the Rocky training montage to learn how to get a podcast under 3 hours, and we figured it out. So good, good for us. I'm gonna applaud ourselves. I'm gonna give myself and Matt a lot of praise personally, but we're gonna get in a quick Pops My Tarts. We're going to do Pops My Tarts this time. We'll do Start Bench Cut on Wednesday. We'll split them up in the 2 different episodes. So, Matt, you had something that you really want to talk about for Pops My Tarts. You had to write it down so you wouldn't forget it. So what is this thing that you need to get off your chest?
Well, I initially wanted to write it down. So I get COVID tested twice a week as part of work. So I have to go and sit in like a waiting room, the whole 9 yards, stuff like that. And this has happened multiple times too, but I was originally going to bring it up last week. And this isn't just in this waiting room. This, you can apply it to anywhere. It's people who use their phone with their sound on. So when you hear the keypad typing, like tick, 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 and like the text message coming in, and like, who the hell do you think you are? You're in a quiet waiting room or like anywhere. And I'm just using me as an example. You're in a quiet room. Everyone's got their phone on vibrate. I can type right now, and you won't hear me type, right? But this person today and this person a couple weeks ago had the sound on. You could hear the keypad, and that's like the send thing. They'll like send it out. And then 2 seconds later, it'll ring that they get a message back. And then you could see all the sound effects that they do. You heard a little pop on the Twitter app, like pop, pop, like when they refresh the Twitter feed. It's so annoying. Like, oh my God, it pisses me off beyond belief. And it's not like young people either. It's people over the age of 35 that just, for some reason, don't understand that you could still feel your phone on vibrate. And actually, that's not true. I've seen some people our age too that have their phone with the sound on, and it pisses me off beyond belief. It's one of my major pet peeves. I don't want to, like, congrats, you have friends and you're texting them. I don't want to hear it. That it pops my tarts beyond belief, Ryan. And I have another one too. It's the people that when you're on a major highway, get in the middle lane, right? So if you're on the turnpike, you get in the middle lane and you do 55. I'm all for that, right? If you're not comfortable going quick, I'm all for it, but do it in the right-hand lane, right? Because the middle lane and the far left lane are your passing lanes to keep the other traffic moving, right? Again, I go 65. I don't condone speeding, but just for the flow of traffic's sake, don't go 55 in the middle lane. It plugs the entire turnpike up from like New York all the way down to Philly, and it takes me so long to get to work because of that. That doesn't pop my tarso as much as the people who do the sound on their phone. That's like, you're just an awful person if you have your sound on your phone. It just bothers the hell out of me. I don't want to hear you texting. I don't want to hear your ringtone. It's a waste of money for a ringtone anyway if you buy a ringtone. I don't want to hear your video that you're playing for everyone to hear. Get some. These come with your iPhone. These headphones, if you're listening and not watching, these headphones come with your iPhone. So put them in. I don't want to hear your text messages. So that's what pops my tarts.
All right, that was very passionate. I have one. They're not going to live up to yours, which is unfortunate. It's just going to be a short one.
So the Flyers, Islanders fans, yeah.
No, it's not actually. It's something different. It relates to this. The Flyers lost to the Islanders in 7 games last night in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So they're eliminated. The amount of people in the city of Philadelphia that have become okay with losing is a little odd to me. Because this was a city back in the day, before I was born especially, where they expected, especially with the Flyers, they expected to win every single year. And yet, it seems we've reached a point where one playoff series win in 8 years, and keep in mind, the playoff series they won this year was against the 24th best team in the league. One playoff series win over the 24th best team in the league in 8 years, suddenly that constitutes a successful season. Now, you can take away positives from the season. That's different. But to say that this season was successful is a complete sham. I don't know when this city became okay with losing. And what the Sixers did was different. We weren't happy that we were losing. That's just something that had to happen. But the Flyers literally had their best chance to win a Stanley Cup for the first time in almost a decade. They won all 3 round robin games. They were the number 1 seed. They had a pretty easy path to at least the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
And they looked like they didn't give a shit for the first 2 rounds. They barely beat. Now, I said they won a playoff series against the 24th best team in the league. They barely beat them. It took 6 games. They never looked good in that series, and they got outworked for the entire Islanders series. They had maybe a few good periods throughout all 7 games. But for the rest of it, the Islanders played a very good 60-minute game. The Flyers did not have one of those games in the playoffs. Their top players outside of Kevin Hayes on the offensive end were not very good. The defense made a lot of mistakes. Carter Hart was phenomenal in his first playoff go-around, and that's what's very upsetting. You don't know how many opportunities you have at a cup. And it often takes you a couple of years until you can look back and well, damn, that was a really good shot we had at the cup, and we just blew it by getting outworked by the Islanders in the second round and losing in 7. So I don't know when this kind of phase started where Philadelphia because as a fan base, we have the stereotype of being very rowdy, very rude, very aggressive, very hard-nosed, blue-collar, whatever adjective you want to use. It seems like that's gone away. And I don't know when that happened. And listen, I'm not condoning our fan base to be assholes 24/7. That's not what I'm saying. But we used to have some type of expectations, especially for our hockey team and the Flyers. And suddenly, winning one playoff series against the Montreal Canadiens means that this season was successful. And as I said, listen, they have young guys. There were some positives takeaway more so from the regular season, but this season wasn't successful. This season should have ended at least in an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, and they couldn't even do that. So that's what pops my tarts. Don't settle for mediocrity.
Well,
Don't settle. And I'm not saying the Flyers are mediocre, but don't settle for just don't settle for a second round exit to the Islanders. Expect a little more from your hockey team.
Wasn't that the last series they won was the Eastern Conference Finals against Montreal during their cup run? Or did they win one after that? They won 2 after that. They won first round against Buffalo in 2011, and then they got swept. Then they got swept by the Bruins in round number 2 that year, and I think that was the year the Bruins won the cup. Yeah, it was.
And then the year after that, they won against Pittsburgh. That was when Drew Laviolette called him the best player in hockey, and that was that series. And then they lost in 5 games to the Devils in round number 2, and they hadn't won a playoff series since. So
that was Glenn
that's what pops.
Devils.
Yeah. Okay, let's not. We're not talking about him. We're not giving him royalties. Not today. So that is it for episode 4A of. We're not bringing him up.
I will say, just to second your point. Every season is a failure or should be a failure if you don't win your championship. That's what I'll say. That's what sports should be.
Listen. I'm not gonna go that. There's certain situations. They're very few, but there's certain situations where if you don't win the title, it was still a successful season. They're very few and far between, but for the most part, I agree.
You got to look at that. You got to look at that individual case. But
yes,
for the teams and the banners behind me, and for a lot of your teams too, it should be championship or bust. That's what it should be.
Yeah, especially in the market that both of our teams are in. But that was episode. You could call it 4. You could call it 4A because we have another part of our NFL preview coming on Wednesday when we took a look at the NFC, and we'll also maybe talk about our who we think is going to win some of the awards and playoffs and all stuff like that. So keep a lookout for that. I want to thank you all for listening to episode 4 of the Best Available Podcast. We'll see you guys again on Wednesday. Thank you for listening.